I can't spend all my time with my birth certificate plastered on my forehead. It is what the facts are, the facts, and so it's not something that I can, I think, spend all my time worrying about.
President Obama saying he's not spending his time worrying about that, but that does close the door on what would have been an intriguing way to close out the midterm cycle, and a birth certificate on his forehead.
Indeed, or maybe a tattoo. All right, Top Line starts right now.
Hello and welcome to ABC News Washington Post Top Line. I'm Rick Klein.
And I'm Amy Walter.
Every day at noon Eastern, we're right here bringing you the latest in politics, everything you need to know about what's going on in your world. It's twitter.com/Rick Klein, twitter.com/Amy E. Walter. And Amy, kick us off.
Well, first of all, thank you for coming back.
Oh, it's great to be here.
We missed you so desperately.
I know you talked about me enough.
Can you tell that we missed you?
Yes, it was desperate. Yes.
All right, my first top line today. Remember, it's the economy, stupid. Yes, we still have the president back from vacation this week. He's taking on a lot of big issues. Obviously, this weekend he was talking about Katrina and the BP oil spill. He's talking about Iraq tomorrow. And we got Middle East peace on the agenda as well. But what about the economy? Something, of course, that a lot of Democrats are going to want to hear about. The president talking right as we speak, at this moment, live, about the economy. Will it be enough to help Democrats who are feeling very nervous about this issue going to midterms?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say this won't be enough.
Really?
We're going to have a lot of intervening factors in between. We've got Iraq, you've got the Middle East. We'll come back to the economy by Friday, but this is really what Democrats want to be focused on. The White House realizes that this event seems a little bit wedged into a very busy week with a lot of other events, so it's going to be tough to break through with all of that. Next up, Beck Day, an extraordinary scene out on the Washington Mall where Glenn Beck rallied tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, whatever number you want to choose, along with Sarah Palin out there in what seemed like more like a religious revival than any kind of political event. And really the unifying theme, the big takeaway, Amy, is that Glenn Beck is Glenn Beck. And Glenn Beck built himself up and built himself sort of a cult of personality that begins to emerge around this. This was a big show that the big star was all about Glenn Beck.
Right, which he does a very good job of doing. And that's what we plan on doing next. This is where our star turn will come next. I'm going to have my own rally, and I will invite you.
Good.
But for Republicans who were thinking maybe this is a way to juice up voters or talk about their issues or some of their candidates, we didn't hear anything about that. Right. It really was all Glenn Beck all the time. All right, and in Missouri today, this is let's be blunt for a minute here. The Democratic Senate Campaign Committee up with an ad attacking Roy Blunt as being part of Washington. The most interesting part, I think, about this ad is the fact that they attack Blunt for voting for the, quote, $700 billion bailout. That same bank bailout that almost every member of the Senate Democratic caucus supported back in 2008. Interesting strategy.
Yeah, and take a look at a little bit of this ad because it is interesting. I think it's fair to say Democrats wish they had more Roy Blunts to run against. Take a look at this.
Roy Blunt's Washington, a culture of corruption and special interests where Missouri gets left behind. And when our economy collapsed, Washington is where Roy Blunt took the lead and voted for the $700 billion Wall Street bailout.
Bailouts indeed. And finally today, cruise control. No surprises in Saturday's primaries in West Virginia and Louisiana. But one of the intriguing facts is that the Democratic governor of West Virginia, Joe Manchin, actually had more Democrats vote against him than Republicans voted against David Vitter, the senator from Louisiana. You'll recall, of course, that only one of them is embroiled in a prostitution scandal.
That's right. Now, there is a lot of talk, though, from Republicans about the fact that maybe this becomes a sleeper, this West Virginia Senate race. Governor Manchin, very, very popular, of course, but the president has approval rating somewhere around 34% in the state of West Virginia. This is going to be an interesting contest I think we should all keep an eye on.
Indeed, indeed. Right. Well, we begin today's discussion with a couple of Republican challengers in this big year for political outsiders. Up in Alaska, joining us from Anchorage is Joe Miller, who is ahead so far, pending the counting of absentee ballots in the Senate race in Alaska. And joining us right here on the Top Line set is Brian Murphy, who's running for the governorship in the state of Maryland. And Mr. Miller, I want to start with you because a lot has been made over the last couple of days about the lead that you have going into the counting of absentee ballots. But there's been some allegations flying around about the role of national Republicans. I want to know at this point, are you satisfied that national Republicans aren't trying to take this away from you?
Well, I talked to Senator Cornyn on Saturday, the head of the National Republican Senatorial Committee, and he gave me his word that he's pulling his team out Saturday night. We know that there are still national folk up here. Don't know who actually hired them, but there certainly is an effort still underway, I think, to skew the results in favor of the opponent. But we're really confident in the results. I mean, we've got about 20,000 ballots that are out there. A significant percentage of those are military. We ran very strongly amongst active duty military. In addition to that, a significant percentage are question ballots that were cast on the day of the vote. Of those ballots, we expect those to run heavily in our favor as well.
Yeah. Mr. Miller, did your campaign actively run an absentee ballot program?
Absolutely. This is not my first campaign, and we absolutely did.
And just one more quick thing, one more quick follow-up. Are you confident then that as these ballots are counted, you're confident in the process, that it's going to be handled appropriately and that the results are going to be without any sort of taint or scandal?
We have confidence in the Division of Elections. There have been several things that have happened over the last several days that give us concern. We have observers on the ground. We're watching the process closely. Where we see inappropriate actions taken, we file a complaint.
All right. Now, Brian Murphy, I want to ask you about your campaign, because a lot of what happened up in Alaska may be relevant for you. And I'm wondering, both of you have got Sarah Palin support. Is that going to be enough? What is it going to mean? How can you get what happened with Joe Miller in Alaska coming out of nowhere to beat the establishment candidate that happened in Maryland?
Well, the reality is, Sarah Palin, her name's not in the ballot. She can't win it for me. But she gives me the chance to be on the stage. Everyone's talking about this campaign, a lot of buzz. And the reality is, I'm looking at this. This is our budget. I've been doing this since January. This is the right time for the economy, stupid, in the previous segment. I mean, I'm the only one who's a private sector candidate. I'm not a politician. I'm very proud to say you can't blame me for any of this, because in the last 8 years, we've had the largest growth of government in our history. We've had the highest tax increases in our history. And we've got the record unemployment and record deficits to show for it. So that's why I'm running Governor Palin. I'm honored she endorsed me, and I want to give her a win. Yeah,
now, of course, in Alaska, Governor Palin was pretty heavily involved. In the last weekend of the campaign, she even recorded calls on behalf of Mr. Miller. Are you expecting that kind of hands-on support?
My staff talks to her pretty much every day, every other day.
Talks to her directly?
The staff, our staff, my campaign manager. And the reality is, we want to give her a win. And I think we can. I think we have 14 days left. My opponent is basically trying to convince Republicans, because Maryland's not Alaska. Obviously, he's trying to convince Republicans they have to settle to win. And that's what the RNC is doing. They're saying a true Republican can't win anywhere in the country. And, Joe Miller saw that in Alaska. I mean, obviously, I think he could have had a pretty big margin if they hadn't, been meddling the whole time. And you see that across the country. The Republican base wants candidates like me, like Joe. And we're trying to give it to them. We have 14 days, and I love where we are. 15 days.
Is she going to come in and campaign for you, do you think?
We have nothing finalized, but the reality is we have 15 days. We've got a great position. Everyone says we can't win, but if everyone's saying we can't win, but they're voting for me anyway, I like my odds. They say, you can't actually have a Republican in Maryland, but I like what you stand for. That's everybody's talking point.
And Mr. Miller, I want to follow up on something that we had you on the show about 6 weeks ago or so. And the big issue of the day was unemployment benefits. And you made the point that those are not constitutionally authorized. I want to ask you vis-a-vis some of the entitlement programs, Medicare and Social Security in particular. You were pressed on this a little bit on CBS yesterday, and I want you to expand a little bit. Do you think those programs are constitutionally authorized? Should the government be in those businesses?
Our position on both those programs has been made very clear throughout the campaign, and it's very difficult in a soundbite to, I guess, provide you a full description of where we're at on this. But it's very important that this country maintain fiscal solvency in order to ensure that the benefits that people have paid into, that those are honored. My parents are Social Security recipients. In fact, they're almost exclusively dependent on Social Security and Medicare. And the utmost concern that I have is for the fiscal position of the country to ensure that we can continue to pay the benefits to those most dependent. But I think that we're being incredibly foolish if we think that the system can continue in the way it is. I mean, as of April of this year, the inlays to Social Security were outstripped by the outlays.
Right.
We've got net deficits running now.
So is there... Sorry, is there an immediate solution that you would like to see for Social Security then? Something if you come to Washington that you're going to put out there on the table day one?
There has to be a transition, and we will have to determine where that point is, where we transition out of the current system into something else. We're looking at all options. We're looking at the option that was proposed by President Bush. We're looking at Representative Ryan's plan. It is absolutely critical that we look at all options. But, frankly, where we're at as a nation is the federal government is broken.
Right.
And I think we have to look at transferring power back to the states in such a way that states can then look at the solutions that may be more appropriate. And ultimately, when you look at the Constitution and you evaluate what the plan was originally, it was for states to take on more power than the federal government, particularly in the areas such as those things that may promote the general welfare.
Right.
It was not a federal role.
Very quick.
I will tell you, I mean, what I want to make very clear is that it is very critical that we maintain the faith with those most dependent
Right.
at this point, because we can't let our seniors out in the cold.
Very quickly, in our last 20 seconds, do you agree with those sentiments? What would you like to see done with these entitlement
Well, absolutely.
programs?
He's running for a federal office. I'm running for a state office,
Right.
and the 10th Amendment's very clear. The enumerated powers in the Constitution. The state of Maryland can, facilitate education. I think it's too big. It's wasteful. A lot of our programs. I'm looking here. We've had 60% growth in the last 8 years. But the reality is, we need to minimize the federal government's involvement, maximize the states, and the best benefit for the taxpayers.
All right, Brian Murphy, thank you for being here, and Joe Miller up in Alaska. Good luck to both of you in your campaigns and
Thank you.
anything that
Thanks.
may develop after
Thanks
that.
for joining us.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Thank you.